screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones, the holly suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance fall that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome back to Rogue Ways, where tonight we're talking about disbelief. Disbelief being the second wound of trauma. Any crisis or any trauma may traumatize you, and then you may become instantly re-traumatized or traumatized in a new way because of the disbelief of the people around you. And I've experienced this so many times. It's actually been one of the most confusing aspects of my trauma throughout my life, no matter which trauma we're talking about, is how many people won't respond to it, treat it as though it didn't happen, minimize it, dismiss it, tell you you're stupid or you're crazy or you're just wrong. Even if it happened right in front of them, like even if they saw part of it or understood that it was real, it's so fascinating to me. Before it was fascinating, it was deeply, deeply hurtful. And probably, especially in my earliest case of trauma, more hurtful than the trauma otherwise. I'm not sure you can measure it, right? I'm really not sure, but it weighs more heavily on me to this day, the dismissal of my trauma than the trauma itself. So we'll get into some of this, the psychology around it, why people are like that. It's not actually that they're hateful, horrible, broken people. They are kind of broken. They don't hate you. They actually love you so much they can't handle it. It's often usually what's going on is they love you so much they can't accept that this thing has happened to you. But more often probably because what we mostly experience is this lack of belief or this dismissal from coworkers, friends, acquaintances, just random people. More often it's that they can't handle that the world contains the type of thing that happened to you. It's actually too traumatizing for them to imagine what you experienced exists, and so they'd rather dismiss it. So it feels very personal. It feels very personal. It feels very harsh. It feels rude. It feels hurtful. It's full of its own emotional trauma just to experience it. But it isn't actually about you. And so I've been re-experiencing this yet again since my most recent trauma and crisis, which was my anaphylaxis last weekend that was life-threatening, to say the least. And I'd forgotten. I had forgotten that people were going to respond that way. I'd forgotten that that's essentially the norm. I'd forgotten that even people who are otherwise sort of healthy and well and, upright and whatnot are likely to act this way. And so I feel it's helpful for me to share this. Someone out there is going to hear this and go, oh, that's what I experienced. And that's why it hurt so bad. And also, hopefully, if you have experienced anything like this in any of your traumas, big or small, right? Nobody's measuring traumas here. Just whatever traumatized you matters, right? Hopefully you will be able to release some of the pain around it once you understand the psychology of it. So I always like to look into the psychology of things or the sort of why of things. I like to understand why people do what they do. It helps me to cope. It helps me to cope with the fact that there are so many people who have otherwise failed me through the years, not meaning to. And not because they don't love me. So it's hard. It's hard that you often don't have the support you need, and especially in the most traumatizing situations, because people aren't strong enough to be there for you. And so if you have someone who is, God bless them. Hold on to that person. That's amazing. I finally do have some of those people in my life. And again, I'm not trying to blame anyone. I'm not trying to call anyone out. I'm not trying to criticize or judge people. And I hope that I haven't done this to people in my life. And I probably have without knowing it. I don't think so. I think I'm one of the least likely people to dismiss a trauma or, minimize something for somebody. but who knows, right? Because we all have blind spots too. So I actually, my whole life, have been looking to try to help people acknowledge their trauma, assess it, understand it, and heal from it. This is part of what makes me a good healer and a good person to be in a sort of therapeutic situation with, is because I have gone through the darkest of hells and come out the other side intact with a whole heap of tools. So whether we approach it from like the spiritual or the mental or the emotional or the physical or all of the above, I have got a lot of support to offer people. So I don't know though. Maybe I have, right? Maybe I have also dismissed others. We should always be looking at ourselves with the eye of like, they're there, but by the grace of God go I, right? Like whatever we're seeing in other people, we should wonder if we could also find it in ourselves. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I don't know, how long it's going to be. We'll see. So I always think, oh, it's a quick one. And then sometimes it's just not. So I am mostly feeling pretty good, actually. I've had, I get the, again, you can't actually see like how speckly and red and weird my skin is. And sometimes it gets really, really deep and rosy, especially after a shower. I think I mentioned this on a recent show, just the heat difference. Even if I make it sort of like lukewarm, it's just too much for my skin. It's too much sensation. And so it'll respond. And I guess, as I may have said in previous shows too, that's supposed to go on perhaps for 3 weeks or more. So it's not super uncomfortable. My energy is finally getting back to normal. This is a week and a few days after the onset of anaphylaxis. I'm still just starting to barely get back to normal. I do not have my normal energy level still. I'm doing way better though. Every day is better. So it's good. I'm not trying to worry anybody, but just for me, and maybe for you, if you ever, God forbid, have to go through something like this, I just expected like, okay, well, the anaphylaxis is over and I'm on meds now. So like, I'm better, but like, no, your body went through a near death experience essentially. And so it's stressed and it's overwhelmed and it's like barely getting its shit back together. Right. And so it's been an intense recovery, much more than I expected. I didn't know what to expect, but I expected much quicker than this. And so it's interesting, to say the least, to see how long this is taking, to give myself sort of some grace and some time and some rest and everything that I might need, sleeping long nights, just pulling it back together again. So I'm lucky to be here and be alive. I'm happy about that. I'm happy my energy is returning, and I am happy to be here sharing this all with you. If one person is helped by the content of this episode, I will be happy. But I also, as always, am essentially doing it for myself. All the things I do for me. I want to do this episode. I wanted to research this. I wanted to look into it. I wanted to put it all together in a nice bubble for myself. That's part of my healing process. And if it also helps you or entertains you, beautiful. Hallelujah. We'll take it. So otherwise, we'll jump into things tonight. And we'll talk here. I do always want to invite you to rogueways.org. It's where everything I do is. I do much more than this show. I have my books here that you can buy from me. You can also get them from Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Audible. You can listen to them if you like. They're all here. They're fantastic books for you. The fictional trilogy that follows humanity through the Kali Yugas and Golden Ages, and also the channeled inspirational messages are here for you. You can also go to the shop. The shop has powerful orgone. I've done whole episodes on this orgone. It's very powerful, very amazing. And so if you need any boost in your life of purification, of upliftment, of healing, then these are all here for you. It's also a great way to continue to support me through this time. It's been very challenging, and I appreciate the donations as well. There's a donation option here in the shop. It's $10, is the sort of single donation. You can do multiples of this if you want to give a higher amount. I'm very grateful for the donations that have come in, and for the people who've been buying their orgone and buying the books. Those are also great ways to support. But are also, even if you're not trying to support me through this time, they're just awesome things to have in your life that will also uplift you. So Great place to go, rogueways.org. Lots of good stuff to check out there. And rogueways.substack.com is also a great place to stay in touch, to get great articles that I write for free, and also get the channel messages for the paid subscribers there. Great way to support as well. If you love the show, if you love my content, if you love what I do, if you just want to support, it's a good place to just be a subscriber. But if you also like the channel messages, they're here for you. On this sort of different but similar topic, again, my most recent post on Substack is Buddha says life is suffering, and that we can free ourselves from this suffering by remembering to free ourselves from the illusions of this experience and our attachment to it. It's not technically a channeled message, but I felt them coming through multiple times throughout it. So it's like it's how I used to channel before I knew I was doing it. It's like a half channeled conversation. But that's for everybody, even if you're a free supporter. So I hope that everyone has enjoyed that and all the other things that you can find here on rogueways.substack.com. Thank you all who subscribe for free or paid. So I'll just mention again, I won't go into details, but when I was a child, my first sort of deepest, most profound, and still the most profound trauma I've suffered in this life was being serially tortured by a dentist. And no, it wasn't just, oh, it kind of hurt or I was hard to get numb. It was that I literally didn't even know what Novocaine was until I was like 11 years old. I didn't know what numb was. And I didn't know that people could be numb instead of feeling the horrible pain of having your teeth drilled on. And so multiple times I would go in. This dentist seemed to also create holes in my teeth or cavities so that I would have to come back. I had horrible abscesses, and everyone just thought I had a really shitty mouth, and that I had a really, really bad genes, or I had really poor nutrition. But my brother and my sister didn't have the crappy situation I had. So, maybe that could have tips me off later, at least, as I was coming to grips that this actually happened to me. Really horrible, very psychological, very intentional, very dark, very twisted. And so I'll leave it at that. I was made to return to this dentist over and over again. Eventually, I actually found other people who were tortured by the same dentist in the same exact way. And I found out that all of us had a lot in common, that being that we were all the youngest child of a single or impoverished mother. So I wasn't technically the daughter of a single mother, but I was, in all intents and purposes, because my father was mostly absent. We were definitely very poor. And so this dentist picked victims that he knew had a very little chance of getting out from under his grip. So very, very intentional. Definitely a predator. One of the darkest people you could imagine, especially being under the power of such a person. Horribly traumatizing. I definitely learned how to leave my body and dissociate at a very early age. Part of this I can then attribute some of my spiritual gifts to later on. Just, you can think like, oh, something good came out of it. And lots of other actually good things came out of it too. And I don't just say that to try to dismiss my own trauma or paint over it, but it just is true. If you're on a healing path, you've probably seen this in yourself as well, that even the darkest things can be turned to light. And again, I wouldn't be a very good healer today, spiritual or otherwise, if I hadn't gone through things like this and learned to transmute them and come out the other side. If I hadn't learned to have an exceptional amount of space that I can hold for an exceptional amount of darkness in other people, because I've lived it, right? And I don't dismiss it. And I can actually look at it and say, yeah, I'm really sorry that happened to you. And so this was really horrible. It was awful. I would tell them, I'd say, this hurts really bad. I'm very young, so I'm just trying to express what I can with my limited ability to do so. But I was just ignored and I was dismissed. And they were like, yeah, the dentist always hurts. It always hurts. Everyone hates the dentist. And I was like, can you imagine being like, oh my God, everyone has to live like this? It was so confusing to me that anyone even did it. I was like, I'd rather just have rotten teeth and have tooth pain or whatever. I'd rather just not deal with it. Because it was so horrible. And they just dismiss it. You're a crybaby, you're too sensitive, like you're imagining things, you're being dramatic, all the things, all the things. And so I had to keep going back. Eventually, my brother at some point, or my sister, maybe I think it was my brother, that was describing the needle for Novocaine and how good it felt to be numb. And I was like, and everyone was there. Like my whole family was there. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, when they put the needle in your mouth. And I was like, I've never had a needle. And he was like, yeah, when they and it's kind of cold and then it's like, fuzzy. And he's describing like becoming numb. And I'm like, I've never felt that. He's like, yeah, your like face is, you can't feel it. I'm like, I've always felt all of it. And I know there was a realization and a dawning of this realization at this moment. And I know it was just as quickly like pushed away because, and you can imagine too, again, if you were someone's mother and then they're describing this to you and then you realize that you had ignored it, or if you're their sister, you're their brother, you're their father, you're anyone, and you realize that you had ignored this thing and that this person is actually describing horrors beyond horrors, that's a bit traumatizing itself. So that was pushed away. We didn't go back to the dentist. So maybe there was an effect there. I can't remember if there was some other reason, right? We moved or I don't know what. But we never spoke of it again. No one ever asked me like, hey, how about that torture? Like, hey, no one gave me the name torture. I didn't even know the word for it. Right? I just had this like nebulous horror in a part of my brain that I had learned to push away and that no one else would acknowledge or look at or talk about. So I also just didn't look at it or talk about it. So I described this much later in my life, kind of remembering this. And it wasn't an accurate way to describe it, but I don't know any other way to describe accepting the presence of it, or accepting its existence again, because I never really forgot. At no point was I confused about whether or not I had been tortured by a dentist. I didn't have the language for a while. Eventually I did, but like no one ever talked about it. I didn't talk about it with anybody, but I didn't forget. It just wasn't present in my mind. It wasn't something I was allowed to think about. It was too big to deal with. It was too much to deal with. And so it just got suppressed. So when people talk about suppressed memories or repressed memories, they're often like this. You don't actually forget the thing. You just sort of learned to ignore it as though it never happened. So we can say we remember. We didn't ever really forget, right? So that was really traumatizing for me to have everyone tell me from the first moment I experienced this, that it wasn't real, that it wasn't happening, that I was dumb, that I was a cryberry, that everybody experienced this, all these things that told me not to care, not to pay attention, and not to feel any certain way about it. So very traumatizing to have that dismissal of one of the worst sorts of traumas maybe that people go through. Pretty dark. Again, much later in my life, I was abducted by a man. I was dragged out of a bar. I was very, very lightly buzzed. I wasn't, trashed at all by any means. But so I wasn't super sober either, but this guy just came out of nowhere earlier in the evening. He had actually grabbed my butt and I'd actually punched him in the face. Totally who I am. And when I punched him in the face, the look in his eyes terrified me because he was excited that I had punched him in the face. He now all of a sudden had this like, I can't even say, but this look of pure like delight and maybe desire. But I just, walked away and I did something else and I was hanging out with other people and I didn't see him again the rest of the night. But when I was leaving the bar, he apparently had been watching me and came out right as I was coming out. And as I was leaving the bar, he grabbed me from behind and began to drag me away. And even though there was a whole group of people there smoking at the door, nobody did anything. And I screamed and I cried. I had tears coming down my face and I was screaming, help me. I was looking and making eye contact with them. And they just like laughed and ha ha ha. It was like a pure nightmare. I mean, like, I thought I had gone insane for a second. I thought maybe I'm dreaming for a second because there's nothing in my brain that has the ability to conceive of people doing nothing. And you've maybe heard me tell these stories before, but it blew my mind. And I just realized like, oh, I'm alone in this. I'm surrounded by people, but no one's going to do anything about this. And I later understood the psychology of the group, and I understood the psychology of people don't do anything when no one's doing anything. And since no one did anything, no one did anything. And it sounds stupid, but that's how humans operate. And if one person would have even said, hold on a second, is she okay? Someone else might have been like, no, she's not. And someone else might have helped. But since no one did, no one did. And you may have seen that happen in various times in your life, where someone seemingly should have done something or reacted, but no one did, because no one did. It takes one person to just break the mold a tiny bit, and suddenly people are free to act. But everyone assumes if no one's doing anything, no one's supposed to do anything, and nothing's wrong. So I was being dragged down the street away from all the people into dark places where there were no people. And I barely got away. There was no reason I should have got away. This guy was way stronger than me. It was literally because I had watched an Oprah episode on accident. I hated Oprah. My friend loved her. Watched this episode because she was watching it. Didn't even want to watch it. But in that episode, Oprah teaches you how to get away from a man who's much stronger than you by becoming a deadweight. And I remembered that in that moment. And it's the only reason I survived this. I mean, we could go through all sorts of hypotheticals. What if? None of them are good. It doesn't even matter what his intentions were. None of them are going to be okay. There's no good intent. There's no good outcome to this except you escape. And so I became a deadweight and I ran away. So already I had this sort of rejection of my trauma with this whole group of people just staring at me as I'm begging for help. I break free, barely. I became the deadweight and he dropped me and he almost grabbed me right away again. And I just barely got away. Thank my lucky stars and all my guardians and allies. And I ran into the next open business, which was not the one he dragged me out of, but the next one down the street was they were like on opposite ends of the block. There was like nothing in between them. So I'm like running as fast as I can. I get into this door. There's this long hallway for some reason. I've never even been in this bar before, but it's a bar. Long hallway, and at the end of it is a bouncer. And so I'm running. I get to the end of the hallway. I'm like breathless, and I'm like, please help me. There's a guy who's about to come in the door behind me. I knew he was going to come in. I'm hearing the door open as I'm saying this, and I'm like, please don't let him get to me. And the bouncer looks at me and just laughs, and no words, no response, literally just laughs. And so I can't even describe my thoughts, my feelings at that moment, except really, I must be dreaming. I mean, the group of people did nothing, and now this bouncer is laughing at me. I think my face was probably pure distress. I don't think I'm a good actor. I don't think I can hide things. Although, well, in this moment of complete crisis, I'm pretty sure it was just looked intense, and he just laughed. And so I just ran past him. I sat at a table, the only table with an open chair. And I just begged the people there. I was like, please don't let him take me. And they said, who? And I said, whoever is coming right behind me. And they said, okay. And there's 3 men who I've never met stood up and stood right behind me, between me and him. And I just sat there drinking their beer because I was in shock and dissociated and didn't know what else to do. So I just grabbed one of their drinks. And they stopped him from getting me. Thank God for them. Those anonymous men. Thank God for them. And, so he left. They walked me home because they were, like me, aware that he was probably going to be following. I moved out of that house in case he was keeping an eye on me. I moved in with my friend, and thank God I could do that at that time. So I had triple rejection here, right, of the trauma. 1, the group of people who did nothing. 2, the bouncer who laughed at me. 3, when I told people the next day, I'm still unsure if I actually told them that it was a dream because I was still dissociated and not really processing reality. Well, it's very difficult to come back from a trauma. You're in all kinds of shock, mental, physical, emotional. And so this was just the next morning. It was maybe 7 hours later. I'm telling this story to my friend and she's laughing. And I'm like, I'm so confused about whether or not I'm in reality right now, because I can't imagine someone telling me this and me laughing. But the bouncer also laughed, and the group of people also laughed. And what is funny about this? And I started freaking out. I was like, why are you laughing at me? And she was like, well, you told me it was a dream. I didn't know it was real. And I don't know if that's true. It could be, right? I could have been in so much shock that I did say, this is a weird dream I had or something. But it could also be this phenomenon we're talking about tonight where people can't handle what you're telling them. And so they just find a way to reject it. She might have been incapable of understanding that there are people who will just abduct you while you're just at a bar down the street from your house. And so she might have just said, oh, it must be a dream. She must be dreaming. Right? Either one is possible. So I'm not actually sure which of us was doing the dissociating, right? Or the rejection of reality. So do you like my image of an abduction here? It's Persephone being abducted to Hades. So that was the second time I experienced this rejection. I also had the, I forgot about this one until just now. I went to a free, counselor or therapist that was with my college. I was going to college at the time. And so they had free counselors. And I was like, well, maybe I should go, right? I think this was a big, big trauma. So I went to him and I was like telling him what happened. And I was somewhat reluctantly. I'm like, I don't want to talk. I don't know this guy from anyone. I don't really want to talk to him. I just I'm worried about myself because I clearly it was a big deal. And maybe I should talk to someone. And I was telling him and I was like, so I just don't know, what to do now. And he was like, well, how did you feel right afterwards? And I was like, what, like right after it happened? He's like, yeah. I was like, I felt like I wasn't in this world and that none of it happened because I'm dissociative. Because I still didn't know I had PTSD at this point because I still didn't understand the effects of the dentist when I was a child. So yeah, I felt fine, actually. I felt like, oh, I offered the guys to sit in my living room and eat a banana with me, which doesn't even make sense. I was just like, oh, we're all having a normal time here. Hey, you want a banana? Because there's just a banana on my counter. Like, it was ridiculous. And he was like, well, often our first reaction is our best one, so you should stick with that. Worst therapist ever award. I mean, you shouldn't even be allowed to call yourself a counselor, let alone a therapist. There's no reason you should be working in this field. You're a harmful person. Those 3 men who stopped this guy, they renewed my faith in humanity, but everyone else in this story, just ripped it back apart again. I was just like, oh my God, what is happening? Horrible, horrible man. So not good advice, by the way, the worst advice. But again, another rejection of how serious the trauma was, of how serious and deeply disturbing the trauma was, and how much help and support and care I actually needed and wasn't getting. So again, it fits this pattern. I another time was literally stalked for months by a level 3 sex offender. Johnny tells me sometimes, he's like, there's probably people who just don't believe anything you say because your life is an insane series of crazy experiences. And it's true. And I don't blame anybody for not believing anything I say. I totally. If someone else was telling me, I'd be like, maybe. But it's true. I lived in the wilderness next to thousands of acres of national forests in a really remote, beautiful place in the mountains. I was teaching at a school there. And I lived across the street from a level 3 sex offender house. So I didn't know for a while that someone was stalking me. And I'm pretty sure stalking is the correct term, though, as eventually I started to understand someone was pretty consistently standing around the edges of my property, drinking beer and smoking cigarettes. So this is a long time to sit at the corner of a property that isn't yours. And I don't even mean the corner of my property. It was my property. It was just the corner of the part that was a yard instead of national forest or whatever, right? Thick forest. And beer caps, bottles, cigarette butts, all around the perimeter. I would find this stuff. And eventually I was like, well, that's not just left from before I lived here. These are fresh and new and these are being deposited. So I was like, well, someone's hanging out at the edges of my property, smoking and drinking. Still didn't really put it together. Then I started to find my car unlocked most mornings and most of the objects in them in different places than they had been. And when it happens the first few times, you're like, I guess I'm getting careless and I guess I forgot where I put these things. But after a while, you're like, I know that's not where that was. And I know I locked my door because the other times happened and I thought I have to be really sure to lock my door from now on, right? And so I'm trying to tell people I think there's someone stalking me maybe. There's like my car keeps being broken into, and the dismissals happen from right off the bat, right? They're like, why wouldn't they steal the car? I'm like, because a stalker isn't there to steal your car. A stalker is there to slowly cross boundaries until they rape or kill you. That's what a stalker is there to do. And so this escalated from being at the edge of my property to being at the edge of my porch to being in my car. But I was being told that I was probably imagining things, or I probably just forgot to lock my car, or probably just moved things around. And I was going through a divorce at the time, so people just thought like, oh, her husband's probably whatever. But no, he didn't smoke or drink, and he wouldn't have done that. He's not stupid. So like, there's no point to this. So eventually I kind of put it together that perhaps this was from the level 3 sex offenders across the street. It was a really large property. So by across the street, I mean, they're still probably like a mile from my house, but close enough to walk down. And eventually I was sleeping one night and I woke up for no reason at all. Not a sound was made. And there was another time I was actually sleeping in my yard in a tent, because that's really nice to do when you live on a river next to the national forest and it's hot out. And I heard someone approaching the tent. And the only reason they turned around, this was not supposed to be a paranormal episode, but I'll just say I think Bigfoot screamed in the woods and scared them. I'm not joking. I don't know what that noise was. And I've grown up in the woods my entire life. And it was not a mating thing, and it wasn't a buck, and it wasn't a bew, it wasn't a dying thing. I don't know what it was. And so someone suggested maybe it was Bigfoot. And there were other experiences at this house that makes me think that, yeah, maybe it was actually. Never looking for Bigfoot, but I might have found him. So there was that. That was another boundary invasion, right? And then I woke up in the middle of the night in my bed, no reason at all, but I knew for sure something was deeply wrong. You know, trust your intuition. And I peeked out the corner of my window and I could see a shadow figure trying to open my door and get in my house. Shadow because it's dark, not because it's a paranormal being. It's just a dark figure I couldn't see any details of, but I could tell someone was trying to break into my house while I slept. Silently. There's only one reason you try to break into a house silently in the middle of the night while a woman is sleeping inside of it. And just like the abduction episode, the outcome is never going to be good. So I didn't have a gun at that time. I had a buck knife. I sat in the corner terrified that someone was about to come into my house where I lived alone in the middle of the woods, miles from other people. I had called 911 and they said, we're like half an hour out, but we'll be there. And so I had half an hour with me and this person, hoping that I would be able to take him down before he took me down. Terrifying. When I told people afterwards, again, I moved out of this house too because of this. So twice I've had to move just from men who want to do horrible things to me. Men who I don't know. Men who I've never met. Men who have no reason to choose me or pick me or stalk me or abduct me. So when I told people about it, literally, they were like, oh, that's not happening. I mean, like, literally, they told me to my face, like, that's not what's happening. My coworker, I was like, I have to move because a man has been stalking me and has now tried to get into my house in the middle of the night. And that's the highest escalation. I should have not been comfortable with the other escalations. And since I have no way to protect myself, and emergency services and police can be sometimes more than half an hour away, I'm going to move somewhere more populated and safer where emergency services are safe, like that I feel safer. Whether you can ever be safe in the world or not is a whole other question, but where I at least feel safer. And they were just like, no, that's not even, what are you talking about? They literally just thought I must be insane, which doesn't even make sense to me. I don't think it's that insane to have a stalker. I don't think it's that insane to want to move because you feel unsafe. Literally just, I'm insane. And that was actually the beginning of when I started to become sort of like ostracized in this community, which eventually, like 3 or 4 years later, led to me leaving teaching altogether. But at the time, I just was deeply hurt. I was like, why would they think I'm a liar or a crazy person instead of knowing that there's people who do this in the world? But that's exactly it. People can't handle admitting that there's people who do that in the world. So instead, they will say, this woman I've known for years who is otherwise totally sane, totally reliable, really professional and good at her job and la da da, she's crazy. That's easier than saying maybe there's people who stalk or try to do worse. Crazy. Dismissed my experience, laughed at me, called me crazy, told me I was just wrong to my face. That's not happening. So, 2 more. I lived in Bahrain for a minute. I was teaching in Bahrain. This has actually happened first. So I'm doing these out of order on accident. But I was supposed to live there for 2 years. I was there for about 5 months, I think. And the civil war there between the Shia and the Sunni it's very hot and violent. But I didn't know that. Bahrain is exceptional at controlling the media. Exceptional. It's very difficult. There's actually a woman who was fired from CNN for talking about the violence in Bahrain. Her name was Amber Lyon, I believe. And that's how you know that you don't know what's going on in Bahrain. People were abducted and tortured there. One of our drivers was abducted for a week and then just thrown on the street, bleeding and dying, and found that way. It was crazy. So I didn't know that until I got there for obvious reasons. And once I started to put it together, I was like, the first thing was I was outside one day. I was like, my eyes hurt. And one of the guys who had lived there for a while was like, oh yeah, you get used to it. It's tear gas. And I was like, where? And he's like, everywhere, all the time. I was like, why? He's like, oh, the Civil War, you didn't know? I'm like, what? No. But I was still like, well, I don't know. It's far away. It's like, whatever. It's sad, but nothing I can do about it. I have to live. So I'm just going to live. And then the next hint was this driver getting disappeared. Crazy. And then bombs started going off in my neighborhood. And the first bomb, I was like, oh, bombs go off. Like, just try to deal with it. I walk around this neighborhood every day. I walk to do errands. I walk to go shopping. I mean, you have to. You're living in a city, and that's how you survive. So I'd walk to my gym. I'd walk to the club. I'd walk to get the bus in the morning. Like, I was walking all over. So car bombs are going off. And another, and then another, and eventually within 1 week, 8 people were dead. And they were all within 8 blocks of my house. And so I went to my school leader, head guy, whatever. And I was like, hey, I don't want to die in a car bomb. Maybe you can understand that. And his response was, you're so sensitive. You've got to be stronger. That is like the worst dismissal so far. Like the worst victim shaming. So he wasn't saying, no, there's no bombs going off. There's no one dying. You're fine. He was just like, you need to toughen up and just deal with the fact that you might die in a car bomb. He's like, none of you expats have died so far. It's all us locals. I'm like, you have no threat. You live in a gated community. You have your groceries and everything brought to you. I have to walk around in the neighborhood where people are dying. That's not being sensitive. But it's hard. It can be really hard after a whole life of having all of your traumas dismissed by almost everyone to trust yourself that, yes, this is actually horrible. And yes, you should do something about it. And yes, it's okay to even make drastic changes to make yourself safe. Like the 2 times I moved, one of them being from a house I owned. I had to sell my house to move from this house. And in this case, I was going to move again. But I could tell that he wasn't going to help me. There was a whole situation where it's sketchy over there. So I actually ran away in the middle of the night on a midnight plane and went home. I didn't tell anyone I was going to do that. That's okay with me. Because if you're going to tell me to my face to be tougher in the face of car bombs that kill people, blocks from me, I'm just going to go. You're clearly not a person who can be reasoned with. And you're clearly not in connection with actual reality. So, he probably lived through this trauma his whole life. And so he's just like, yeah, it's a civil war and you just deal with bombs and people dying. And I'm like, I don't actually have to. Maybe you have to. I can go home. And so I did. Which led to me pretty quickly understanding I had PTSD and CPTSD. And that's its whole own story too. But yet again, this is being dismissed. Even when I got home, I could tell when I'm telling people and there's bombs going off. So I came home that people were like, she's probably exaggerating. The bombs were probably just like really far away, or, nobody really died, or it just was obvious that people were like, I don't know. She didn't want to be there anymore. That was her excuse, right? So I had to continuously be like, no, it was bombs. People died. Like, it was an abduction. I almost died. It was an invasion after months of stalking. I almost died. It was, a torture and a dentist that was harming me. And it was really wrong and not okay. Like, I have to tell myself these things. And I find myself, even when I tell other people these stories, that I like sometimes find myself overemphasizing like how bad it was, because I'm trying to convince them that it was. And they can't be convinced. If they're the people who can't handle darkness and can't handle trauma, can't handle crisis, can't handle a world that's full of uncertainty, can't handle their own mortality, can't handle that they can't control everything, then they're not going to be convinced no matter how many details I pile on. But I still find myself doing it. I still find myself telling people almost too much sometimes. I'm like, yeah, and then it was like this, and then it was like this, and they're like not reacting. So I'm like, okay, well, it was like this. I mean, like, how many details do you need? And then I have to remember, like, none. They actually don't need any. They actually won't respond well to any layer of this story. It might have even been better to just not even tell them. But I've also experienced the other thing where then people are like, why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, because you can't handle shit and you always ignore me. Why would I tell you? You literally dismiss 100% of my traumas or crises, so I just don't tell you anymore. Both happen, right? I mean, what's the answer? I don't know. So, leading up to last week where I had this anaphylaxis, and, there's an interesting thing here too, where like I can take a lot of trauma, and punishment and horror and proximity to death and not really be too perturbed by it. So when you maybe heard the story last week of the actual experience itself, I think the episode's called Anaphylaxis and Antibiotics. You might have been like, why didn't she call 911? Well, because I've been trained my whole life to not respond to trauma or crisis. I mean, like, if I'm the best person for you to like get your arm cut off with or something, I will like not even hesitate to just be right in there, like just cinching the blood, like, we got this, we're going to be okay. Like, I will not lose my shit. Afterwards, I will. After it's all over, I'll go somewhere and just like freak out. But in the moment, like, I will dissociate fully from the emotional and I will just be there, be practical, and be in the trenches with you. It's amazing. It's a really cool skill, except when it's my own crisis I'm in. I was looking at this first aid plan for anaphylaxis, right? You see it here before you if you're looking. And it's like, if you have any one of the following signs, you need to call 911. I had like 5 of them. I had abdominal pain, vomiting, with other signs. So if you have other signs of anaphylaxis and vomiting or diarrhea, you're supposed to call 911. I was pale and floppy. I had difficulty talking. I had swelling of my lips, swelling of my gums, not technically my tongue or my throat. I had difficulty breathing. I was wheezing breathing. I had too many of these. I had a consistent cough. I had almost all of these. And I didn't call 911. I didn't call an ambulance, and I didn't go to the emergent care because I was like, it's cool. Let's just see what happens. I can breathe. And to Johnny's credit, I think Johnny was like, okay, do we call now? Okay, now? Okay, now? Okay, now? He's like, yeah, and so we probably should have, but I just was like, I don't know. I think I'm not gonna die. Like, it should be okay. And sometimes anaphylaxis can be super quick and all these things come on within like 20 minutes. Mine came on over 12 hours, I want to say. So yeah, it was bad. And I find, I'm going to say like 70% of people who have, you can kind of see some of my red stuff. Some of it kind of shows up if I'm close. I want to say about 70% of people have had some level of dismissal around it. And so I find myself again being like, no, it was bad. No, it was like life-threatening. No, it was like really severe. And people are like, oh, it was just like a rash though? And I'm like, Sure. Sure, it was just a rash. Someone said, "Well, haven't you always had rashes?" Like, well, yeah, I have always had rashes. My whole life I've had autoimmune. And so I can get welty and like rashy and hot. My skin can get red and raised from basically any chemical. And sometimes like just changes in temperature, but most often it's like a chemical exposure of some kind, sort of like multiple chemical sensitivity syndrome. But that's it. My face doesn't swell. I don't sneeze. My breathing doesn't become labored or difficult. All those other signs don't happen. So, what is the point of asking me, don't I always have rashes? The point is to minimize it and say, oh, no, this was just what you've always had, right? It's just normal. No, it wasn't normal at all. It was very crazy. It was very crazy. It was life threatening. And I went too long putting up with it, as is my tradition, as is my want, because that's been my training through life, is to minimize my own experiences to a severe level. When I can notice that something is wrong and then choose to take care of myself, it's like a massive success. And I'm doing that more and more in my life. I have been for years. I've been healed and done PTSD therapy many, many years ago, and really good habits and really good responses and way better. But, this reminded me of just how much I can put up with. And so you may see both. You may see yourself in the person who has been traumatized even once, but maybe even frequently, like myself, and have learned because of others' responses, rejecting it, minimizing it, saying it didn't happen. You've learned to project it in yourself. And that's why I say, and this episode is titled, Disbelief is the Second Wound. Because the trauma itself was bad enough. It's bad enough that my body went through this shock and his immune system overload, and my nerves are all frayed, and I'm exhausted, and, struggled to stay alive for many days. That's bad enough. It's much worse to, on top of that, have many, many people who I know care about me be in various stages of dismissal of what actually happened and not accepting that this actually happened to me, telling me that it didn't happen to me, basically, in various ways. Right? You're overreacting. Oh, you're just allergic to everything, aren't you? No, I've never had an actual allergic response to anything. Over and over and over again. So I get it too, right? Part of this is people are coming to terms with it. Like they are like, how bad was this? And isn't it okay? And isn't it okay? And you're like, well, it wasn't okay. And sometimes they're like, oh, wow, it really wasn't okay. And they get there. And then a lot of times they don't. And they just stay with like, wasn't bad. You're okay. Everything's fine. And so it happens. So let's see if we can get this a little bit bigger. Oh, sorry. It's so bad. But it says when a person is traumatized, it's not only the trauma they're healing from, but the number of times they weren't believed. It's being exposed to people who defend their perpetrator. It's being shamed for not letting it go. It's healing from the world's response to vulnerability. And it's true. And so it can be as painful or as damaging as the event itself to have this trauma. To have this trauma occur and then have it be dismissed, no matter what the trauma is. And it happens in all kinds of ways too. I remember one of my students once was in a car accident. It was a very, very small car accident. It wasn't that bad. But it doesn't matter. For him, it ripped him apart. He wasn't okay. He was having panic attacks. Like, he was going through it. And who knows why? There's all kinds of reasons why. There might be so many other stressors in his life, and that was just the thing that pushed him over the edge. There's all sorts of trauma responses to any level of an unexpected occurrence. The unexpected part is actually the part that traumatizes us when we don't know, when we can't be sure, we don't feel like we have stability. So there's a lot of reasons why this might have traumatized him, but people were literally making fun of him for it. They're like, oh, you didn't even get hurt. No one even got hurt. The car is barely scratched. What's wrong with you? Like, buck up. And it was so sad to watch and try to clarify for them why that was horrible and what they should do instead and help them choose better. But it was hard to watch because you could see him struggle with like, something's wrong with me. What's wrong with me? and like nothing's wrong with you. That was a trauma for you. That was a trauma for you, perhaps physically too. Even if it's a small accident, your brain can get kind of jostled around. That can be really hard to heal from, and that can be very unrecognized. Brain injuries are really difficult to recognize, very difficult to heal from. So all kinds of reasons. But then it leaves us grappling with this, right? Of this trauma, not only the trauma, physical, mental, emotional, and otherwise, but also then this rejection by the people who we love, or the people who are supposed to take care of us, the people who are supposed to understand us. And then you feel really lonely. You feel really isolated because you're like, I don't have anybody here who can reflect my experience back at me or just be with me in it. Which is why we are lucky when we have really good therapists as well, or healers in various traditions and ways. And it's confusing. Again, like I said, all those times I was just like, what is happening? Why are people responding this way? Am I dreaming even? I don't ask myself, am I dreaming in the trauma itself? I ask myself, am I dreaming in people's response to it? Because it's so weird to me. But it helps. It helps for us to understand why. So we're going to talk now about why this happens. Why people, why people act like this. There's psychological reasons why, and they are worth exploring. So the first one is the just world fallacy. Just as in justice, it's a just world. We live in a world of justice, right? A fallacy meaning it's not true. It is true at a much higher level. It's not true at this interpersonal level, this societal level. And so this just world fallacy was kind of put together by psychologist Melvin Lerner. And this is a powerful cognitive bias that he identified, and he called it the just world hypothesis. It suggests that people need to believe the world is fair. If something terrible happens to someone, observers may blame the victim or minimize the situation to protect their worldview. This creates a cruel paradox. The more severe the trauma, the more likely others are to doubt it, which is true. The most severe trauma I had, not only did they doubt, they rejected it fully, and they've still never acknowledged it happened. The lower levels, like eventually, sometimes, like I said, people get to it and go, oh yeah, that was really bad. Right? But part of why they do this, the biggest part, is this belief in a just world, this belief that the world is better than that. You must have done something wrong. You must be crazy. You must be wrong about what happened because you're a good person and this horrible thing happened to you. And that's not the world I believe in. I believe in a world where good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. Bad things happen to people who are in bad situations. And I've talked about this too, where it is true, very technically, and worth noting and worth taking responsibility for and worth choosing differently. It is true that if I weren't drinking alone in a college town late at night, I wouldn't have been abducted. It's also true people get abducted in broad daylight doing nothing wrong, totally sober, whatever. So it's not the total picture, but it's worth saying like risk reduction is a beneficial thing. It's not stupid to look at possible mistakes you did make and then not make them again. Yes, you should be able to have a drink or two and be out and have fun, and that's all true. And we know the world we live in, and so it's also intelligent to have people with you, or other safety mechanisms in place. So you have to know it's not a just world. You have to act appropriately. And you have to also know it's not a just world so that when people come to you with this thing that happened that's horrible, you don't reject it. I talk about this too in terms of the border crisis and the immigration question. And no matter where you stand on whether you want people to immigrate here legally, illegally, or none at all, or whatever it is true that the vast majority of illegal immigrants are trafficking drugs or children. And you might even be okay with trafficking drugs, but hopefully no one's okay with trafficking children. But when you bring that up, people will just reject it. They'll say, oh, you're just trying to make excuses for why you're a racist. because their worldview needs to believe that that isn't happening. Because if it is happening, it's a much darker world than they thought. And now someone has to deal with that, and they don't know who and they don't know how. So it's easier to call you crazy, stupid, reject it. That's not happening. It's a very similar thing, right? That is the just world fallacy as well, just in a different sort of light. But both of them have the ability to reject these negative, horrible things that happen, and especially the trauma someone may have gone through, right? It's not happening. That doesn't happen. You know, when that abductor was dragging me away, he told the crowd, "Don't worry, this is my girlfriend. We do this all the time." So they had a really good excuse for choosing to believe this was a just world and what was happening was okay. But again, I was very distressed and crying, and there's no world for me in which a distressed crying girl shouldn't be believed, even if that is some sort of weird fetish that they're playing out for some reason in public together. I would still, to be on the safe side, interfere just in case. Anyway, just world, right? It's a just world. So nothing bad happens and you're wrong. You're wrong or you're bad, right? This is victim shaming, victim blaming, victim dismissal, minimizing the victimization, minimizing the trauma. And it is very, very ironic and cruel that the more severe the trauma, the more likely people are to doubt it and reject it outright. So the more you need people to see you, be with you, and validate you and help you, the less likely they are to do so. Very unfortunate. And so here's a quote from Melvin Lerner, who coined this term and did this study. He says, "The belief in a just world is a form of denial. It enables people to maintain a sense of order and control in a chaotic world at the expense of those who suffer." His study is called "The Belief in a Just World, a Fundamental Delusion." So it's a little bit different from some of the other things that we're going to talk about that are also part of the psychological reason why people reject other people's suffering as not real. And the other is cognitive dissonance. And this is the popular one in the sort of conspiracy and alternative realms to explain the lack of ability people seem to have to cope with or just accept the dark truths of the world. So cognitive dissonance it leads to emotional avoidance often. It can lead to neglect. This was the case for me. When I was a child, I should have ideally had the belief in what I was experiencing and the protection from predators, and not as a form of neglect, unfortunately. And it can lead to procrastination. I don't want to deal with it. I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to start, right? You can justify your actions, your reactions, your choices in the face of this. You can be in flat out denial and other things. So lots of cognitive dissonance effects. We've got a lot of studies on it. A couple of them are being pulled from here and saying traumatic stories provoke discomfort. When someone hears about stalking, assault, or near-death experiences, their nervous system may react with fear or helplessness. To resolve this inner tension, which is a cognitive dissonance, people may reject the story or rationalize it away. Minimization becomes a defense mechanism. So you might even see the just world hypothesis is a type of cognitive dissonance, a type of that same denial. Cognitive dissonance is just the sort of umbrella term for all the different types of cognitive dissonance, all the types of where our brain sees something, but it doesn't fit with what we expect. It doesn't fit with what we want, and so we reject it instead of accepting it. That's essentially cognitive dissonance, right? Cognitive in your brain, dissonance meaning these two things aren't matching up, not accepting the new information. So we all have this. There's also various forms of confirmation bias and different things that are also connected with this. But it's difficult. And the difficult thing about it is people don't know when they're doing it. You might see when someone's doing it because it's something you've already accepted, right? Something you've already learned to sort of like, okay, this is how I can exist with this information, right? This can come into my brain, come into my psyche. I got this. and then you see someone else just flat out rejecting it, right? All kinds of cognitive dissonance. And it makes mass societal control possible. It's bad. But you wouldn't see it if you were doing it yourself. I shouldn't say that. You are possibly doing it and not knowing it. And this is true with all psychological things. We can say to ourselves, oh, I'm not like that. I accept new information. Maybe you do, and maybe you have most of the time, and maybe there's some you haven't. Right? When you're in denial, like you don't know you're in denial. I don't know if you've ever been in denial or if you've ever seen someone who's in like clinical denial, but you couldn't even believe the things that they have forgotten or pushed out of their mind. My sort of not quite forgetting of my childhood torture is a form of that denial, right? Big, huge things that are obvious can be completely blocked out. So you don't necessarily know what you have blocked out. You don't necessarily know what you have cognitive dissonance around. But you will often actively avoid anything that would increase the dissonance. Today, when I went to the dentist, the dentist who prescribed the antibiotics that sent me into my anaphylactic shock response, they all knew what had happened just like a week ago. I went for a cleaning. I was actually supposed to go for a cleaning last like Tuesday, I think, but I was so sick still. There was like no way that was going to happen. And so we, rescheduled it. And so I went today, had the energy to go. It was good. It was fine. Nobody mentioned it. And when someone said something like, I have a really nice dentist, and they were like, do you want a heating pad on? They offer you heating pad and like the chair to vibrate and all these like things to like soothe you. I was like, no, my nerves are very shot and I'm likely to go into reaction as I have been this whole episode. It's fine. It's just a thing that happens and will happen for a few weeks. But I was explaining how if I, give too much impulse or sensory information to my body, it can like trigger more of a response. And so I'd rather not. And I just felt everyone like tense and then just like not respond. Nobody responded to that. And then like eventually they just were like, so the weather, right? Because they didn't want to confront what had just happened. So in cognitive dissonance, you will avoid anything that may bring you close to acknowledging the thing. And that's a very minor example, but you've probably seen this or done this multiple times yourself. Ooh, don't talk about it. Don't go there. Don't go to that store. Don't go over there. Don't open this book, right? And so here's some quotes from some of the greats. From Leon Festinger, A Theory of Cognitive Dissonance, he says, dissonance theory predicts that people will actively avoid situations and information that would increase the dissonance they feel. Epictetus says, people are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them. It's true. It's all up here. It's all up here. And so that's cognitive dissonance. It's another reason that people dismiss experiences, dismiss trauma, dismiss crises, dismiss how you feel, diminish them, reject them. We also have this thing that is true where women are less likely to be not just believed, but treated as though their experiences are valid and accurate. So if you are believed, you may then be sort of like, but it's a woman, so she's like a bit histrionic, right? Or she's emotional, or she's reactive, or she's hysterical. And this isn't the majority of the dismissal I've experienced, but I have experienced it. And that Bahrain example is one example. That director of that school telling me that I was too sensitive and too emotional. I don't think he would have said that to a man. I could be wrong. He might. That might just be his response to bombs. But I think he said that to me because I'm a woman. And I've also obviously had it from doctors and stuff. And this is actually where this comes in. It's where it's the easiest to study is men and women in the exact same situation with the exact same doctors and the exact same symptoms and the exact same reports of severity, men will be given sort of more painkillers or more belief or more support in reducing their symptoms. And women will be like, I mean, you don't really need anything. You're just being crazy. And they'll be given less. And so it's studyable. It's reproducible. We have data on it. And so it's true. And so on gender bias and disbelief, we have from Samuel Owitz from Brave Men and Emotional Women, pain in women is often not taken seriously. It's seen as psychological, emotional, or imagined. And from Dr. Judith Herman from Trauma and Recovery, we still live in a world where women must be perfect victims to be believed. And it's true. And, part of that being stalked and harassed and all of that, I was like, well, how much worse would it have had to get for you to believe me? Right? Like the experiences I listed weren't enough for people. I was just wrong. But if the person would have successfully gotten into my house silently and I didn't wake up and I hadn't called 911 and I didn't have a buck knife in my hand, what then? And then you would have had to believe me, I'm guessing. It would have become obvious. I either would have disappeared or been dead or who knows what. And so, right, you have to be like so deeply, obviously traumatized, victimized to even be believed. So a few more reasons here why people dismiss trauma, can't handle it. We also have secondary victimization. When survivors are doubted, blamed, or mocked, they experience what psychologists call secondary victimization. This additional layer of trauma can worsen PTSD symptoms and lead to long-term mistrust, self-doubt, and emotional isolation. Researchers like Jennifer Freyd have described this as betrayal trauma, harm not only from the original event, but from the social systems and relationships that failed to protect or believe the survivor. So here, betrayal trauma theory suggests that children who have experienced betrayal trauma have a tendency to, quote, forget their traumas to promote their survival. A child has no choice but to rely on the caregiver for all basic human needs. And according to the theory, forgetting or ignoring the abuse is one way to maintain whatever support is still available from that support person. I've known people who are way more tortured than I was as children and who remained with their abusers for a long time. And I for a long time struggled to understand why they would do that. And then I sort of understood like that was still the only person who was giving them food or shelter or clothes or anything like love. And so that's what they had to do, which is horrifying. It's horrifying. But this betrayal trauma is also the same in not receiving a response of affirmation or support in sharing any of our trauma with anyone. So it can be from your parents, it can be from your siblings, it can be from your friends, it can be from your distant family, your acquaintances, your coworkers, it can be from random people online, it can be from your dentist and your dentist assistant, right? So now you've been betrayed. Now not only has the trauma happened, but when you shared it, this person responded in such a way that now you know you can't trust them. You can't trust them to see reality. You can't trust them to see you. You can't trust them to respond appropriately in any situation. So, I talk about sometimes my trust issues and I say, I don't trust anybody. And if you do, I envy you. I trust Johnny. Sorry, everyone else out there. I love you. It's not your fault. I don't trust anybody. I'll trust you to a point, but I know exactly where that point is and I know exactly where it ends. And there's no one who I trust completely. And do you? I would love to know actually if people do. I think people do. I don't know what it's like. I have never known what it's like to trust somebody. So people sort of mark that on my list of like PTSD symptoms. And I'm like, well, that one I think came with birth, but who knows? It's definitely been reinforced all along the way. Can we even have these standards for people? Is it even appropriate to expect people to do anything but dismiss and reject? Because they're not doing great themselves. I don't know if you noticed, but there's not many people who are actually well. And so if they started out not actually well, and then they're trying to just deal with the world, and you're bringing them this thing that they can't handle, is it fair to feel betrayed? I mean, it's okay to feel betrayed. It's okay to feel however you feel. But at some point you have to also just forgive people. You have to forgive. I have to forgive the group of people who did nothing. I understand why they did nothing. I have to forgive the bouncer for laughing. I understand why he laughed. It took me a long time to understand it, but I understand it. And I have to forgive him. I don't have to. I just do, because I can imagine being those people. I can technically understand and imagine. I really don't think I personally would have done any of those things. I really don't, but I get it. And so there, but by the grace of God, I forgive them. Here's another quote. When institutions fail to protect those who report trauma, they contribute to a form of harm known as institutional betrayal. But yeah, and that was early too, right? I'm like, who will help me? No one. Who will stop the predator? No one. Who's going to come? 911 isn't even going to come. Half an hour out, like, okay, I'll try to survive. Why would I have relied on them in the first place? I don't know, but no one should. It's a good lesson for all of us, perhaps, but also, can't trust you. Can't trust you. I could go on. We do a whole show about institutional failure, institutional betrayal, but we won't. Or maybe we will someday. And people also, here's some betrayal trauma symptoms, by the way. Emotional numbness, physical pain. Really, you suppress all of this because no one will even let you express it or say it or anything. And so it's inside of you. People don't believe me that I essentially cured my lifelong, chronic, horrifying physical pain in my back through healing emotionally, through PTSD therapy. I have very little pain now. I still sometimes very extreme, but it's it was constant and extreme, and now it's just extreme from time to time. Very much better. Physical pain is absolutely a symptom of this type of trauma and the suppression of it, and then the betrayal trauma on top of the trauma. Anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, post-traumatic stress disorder, emotional dysregulation, substance abuse. This is just a list of my life. This is just a story of my life. So then there's this thing too, they can't kill the truth, so they try to assassinate the character. They can't kill what happened. They can't stop what happened to you, and they really don't want to accept it. So they say you're crazy. They say you're stupid. They say you're wrong. They say you deserved it. They say you asked for it. They say you're imagining it. All the things they say. They assassinate your character instead. And they silence any talk of the predator, right? Any noticing of the predatory behavior. People also minimize traumatic stories to avoid confronting the existence of real predators. Accepting that someone could be capable of evil actions shatters the illusion of safety. Dismissing a survivor's story is, for some, a way to protect their psychological sense of order. It's very similar to the just world fallacy. It's not really different. It's just a different way of looking at it, of why people ignore darkness, evil, dark people, predatory behavior, predators themselves. We can't accept that level of evil, right? It's why people don't want to accept that children are being trafficked across the border. It's in all kinds of aspects. It's why predators get away with it, right? Again, I have to forgive my parents. If your kid is telling you this dentist is hurting me really badly and whatever, you're like, he wouldn't. Why would he? Obviously, it's a kid, right? There's all kinds of reasons why. And he knew it, and that's why he did it that way. But it makes sense. It protects their psychological sense of the way the world works, of who people are, of good and bad, of how far they are from evil or darkness or chaos or the uncontrollable. So Dr. Bessel from The Body Keeps the Score, which I've heard is a really great book, by the way, and I haven't read it, but I already understand it. I think you might too. But if you don't understand how your body stores trauma, how it stores information and all this negative stuff that's happened to you, if not healed, is ripping you apart. It's giving you heart attacks. It's causing your liver to fail, it's harming you physically, then it might be a good book to read. The Body Keeps the Score. But Dr. Bessel says, we don't want to believe terrible things happen, because if they happen to others, they can happen to us. So we look for flaws in the victim stories instead. Don't want to believe it can happen to us. Don't want to believe it's even possible for it to happen to us. Oops. We'll talk about this in a second. So silencing survivors is a way of maintaining the illusion of control. And in order to sort of like heal this in yourself and others, some people are like, well, you have to get to a point where we can believe each other, right? We have to get to the point where you just, when someone comes to you and says this thing happened, you just start from a place of belief. And you may have to actively do that. If you're listening to this and you're like, I don't want to ever treat anyone that way, then you might have to actively say to yourself, when people tell me something horrible, I'm going to stop and I'm going to do what I need to do in order to sort of like release whatever else might have come up and just say like, I believe you. Right? And you could go back later and say, okay, I changed my mind. I don't believe you anymore. Maybe it's you get to a point where you like realize, no, that person actually was lying and whatever. And that happens too. Complicating the matter further. You might have to do that intentionally. You might also on your own say like, well, maybe I don't need to share my trauma with people. Maybe I don't need to tell people the story. And then, like I said, you might find the people who feel betrayed because you didn't tell them. So you gotta take your pick. And maybe there's just a level to it where you're just saying, yeah, I've suffered a lot, or I've had really hard experiences. Or it's not, you can still share it without getting into the details, maybe. It's up to you. It's your life. It's your experience. It's the people in your life. It's your relationship with them. So how you receive people's traumatic stories, people's crises, people's experiences of darkness and evil, and then how you share your own, it's really up to you. So obviously appropriate times, not appropriate times, appropriate people, inappropriate people. And so that's all something to decide for yourself what's healthy for you and what's not. But it also is really not true that we should believe all people. It's really not true. Like that whole thing where we're like, believe all women. It's not true. There are plenty of people, especially in the cluster B personality disorder groupings, people, narcissists, sociopaths, histrionic people. There's plenty of people who make things up. There's plenty of people who are absolutely lying about it. There's plenty of people who are using this to their advantage. They're using it to destroy someone's life because they're jealous of them or mad at them, right? Or wanted something from them they couldn't get. So it is also confusingly, perhaps, not true that you should believe all people. It's like I said at the beginning of this episode, there's so many things that have happened to me in my life that are insane and intense and extreme that I totally understand if there's people who question me or don't believe me, or, especially people who don't know me, like I don't care at all. Because I might not either. Because I know so many people who have lied about really horrendous things. I mean, like really horrendous things. I know people who've lied about rape. I know people who have lied about incest. And if you've never, good, I'm glad. I've known some sketchy, dark people, and I've seen what they've done to people's lives. So it's definitely worth it to wonder, to question, but maybe we could just like draw a line somewhere and we could say, okay, in the moment, if someone's running to you and they're like, maybe you just start with like, okay, what do you need? How can I help you? Right? And then, like I said, after that, if you're like, this doesn't really fit together, or like, I'm not sure, then maybe you question it. Maybe to the person you just say, I understand that feels horrible, or this is awful, or whatever. And then in your mind, you also know, like, I don't know if it happened or not. It's okay. It's okay. I think at some point, you can become sort of like self-aware enough that you can tell the difference between people who are genuinely needing you, genuinely having emotions and, right, trauma and crisis, and the people who maybe aren't. And like the healthier you are in yourself, the less you're going to have those people who aren't around you anyways. Doesn't mean they're not going to pop up, try to take advantage, try to scam you, whatever. But yeah, it's also another extreme to go the route of just constantly searching for the victimization in everyone and trying to affirm the victimization in everyone. And I see people like this too, again, often in the cluster B category, who like want people to be victimized and want to find ways to them. Oh, that happened to you? Oh, that was rape. Right? Like, I don't think it was rape. I think it was consensual, and then they just didn't like it afterwards. Like, nope, that's rape. Oh, that happened to you? Or that person was abusive. I think they're just a dick. I don't know if it was abuse, still someone you might not want in your life, but like maybe not abusive, right? And maybe you've met these people too who are just too far the other way. Everything's an extreme victimization crisis, like trauma constantly for everyone. That's a bit too far the other direction. This is also, we shouldn't go so far as to make it like, what would be the opposite of the just world? The predatory, like chaos world. That's also a fallacy, right? There also is relative stability in life. There also is the ability to understand that wild things out of our control happen, and that's okay. Like we just have to move forward and find ways to feel, rooted and good and strong and stable and in the ways that we can. They're both true. They're both true, and so we don't want to go to either extreme. And here's sort of a flashback to Middle Path episode Sorts of Days. That's really what it comes down to. Not going to some extreme or the other, not going into, I don't believe anybody, or there's no darkness in the world, there's no bad and there's no wrong. And also not saying like, well, everything's perfect all the time. Or, everything's horrible all the time. Everything's bad. Everyone's traumatized. Everyone's abused. Everyone is in darkness. They're just both not true. Even in a life like this, full of trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma after chaos after, even that, I have a wonderful, amazing life. I have a very well-rounded sense of self. I have a really good ability to love myself and others. I have transmuted my darkness into a light that I get to share with people. And it's not a Pollyanna, ignore the darkness light. It is the best type of light because it says, yeah, shit is dark as fuck out there. Real dark. And sometimes we come face to face with that horrifying darkness, and I know it and I get it, and we're going to be okay. And look, I'm okay, right? I'm good. And that's the best part about it. So you eventually learn you're indestructible, actually. And I think I said this last week too. You're actually indestructible. You're actually so strong. People say this to me all the time. You're so strong. And I kind of say in myself, in my heart, like, oh, I kind of wish I didn't have to be, but I am. And thank you for seeing it and noticing. You're right. This says you're not a victim for sharing your story. You are a survivor setting the world on fire with your truth. And you never know who needs your light, your warmth, and raging courage. And I saw this today sort of synchronistically, and I had been putting together this research again, just for myself. I wasn't actually looking to do a show on this. I was just like, I need to touch base with the reasons why people do this again, so I can continue to let go of how much it hurts my feelings when people, some I love and some I don't know at all, tell me that my experience wasn't real, or that it didn't matter, or that it wasn't very bad. And so I was doing this for myself, and I saw this quote and I was like, yeah, you know what? I should do a show on this because somebody does need that. Somebody out there is sitting there going, oh my God, that's what happened to me. Oh, that's why they did that to me. Oh, that's what that was. And that is worth everything. And it's also helpful for me to remember that it is true that I have turned this darkness into light, and that it is okay. It's okay to have experienced these dark of experiences. It's okay to have come face to face with demons, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to say so. And it's okay, and it's not a burden, because this is the other thing I do is then I'm like, well, it's a burden. Obviously, people can't handle it. Obviously, people are just like, don't say it, don't talk to me, don't, right? And so I don't want to burden them. But it's not a burden. It's not a burden. Well, it is kind of. It literally is sort of for them. But at the same time, it's theirs to take or not. It's theirs to deal with or not. It's theirs to transmute or not. It's not up to me what burdens them or what doesn't or what feels too overwhelming for them. I can't control that. But I can know that for me, I have to be honest about what happens to me, right? I have to be like, yeah, it was anaphylaxis, or yeah, the guy abducted me, or yeah, it was a bomb and it killed someone. I have to do that for me. So if I don't do that for me, I suffer. I have physical pain. I have mental health issues. I have anxiety. I have depression. So it's not okay for me to suppress it, to deny it, to not talk about it, to pretend it didn't happen, or to try to hold it back from someone in case it feels overwhelming to them. So again, I said you have to decide for yourself what you want to do with your trauma, how, who and when and where, and what's appropriate and not appropriate. And this is what I've come to for me is I have to say it, not all the time, not in every space, not to everyone, right? Not in every detail. But I have to be honest about it. And the people who don't want to handle it, they're welcome to leave, right? I'm not in charge of what they listen to, what I say, or what I talk, or what I do, and if they're around or not. That's their choice. So I do it for me. I do this show for me. And I'm glad if it also helps others. And we'll just have one more quote here, in case you resonate with it too. Rupi Kaur says, "And here you are living despite it all." And here we are living despite it all. And isn't it good to be alive? I did not think so a week ago. About a week and 4 days ago, I was begging to die because I was in such excruciating pain. But just a few days later, I'm very, very grateful to be alive despite it all, living despite it all, in the center here, surrounded by light, life, and love. Hallelujah. And until you are as well, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Glued to them screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Referrers trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The paupers see this mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.